Oké. Kan iedereen mij horen? Can everyone understand me? Yeah? All right. So, welcome to the first presentation of this afternoon. OT security and visibility and control. Before we start with the presentation, I would like to do a quick poll in the audience. Who of you is still using this device? Some of you are. I'm doing that as well. And I completely understand you, but it's actually also kind of funny because the USB devices, USB sticks, have gotten like a devil sign on it. We cannot use them anymore. Test 1, 2. Can you still hear me? Yeah, okay. And this was also illustrated by a colleague of mine at the beginning of this week. So I work at Exclusive Networks. So we are value-added distributor. I'm in the pre-sales team, technical team. So we techies, we do everything concerning pre-sales, but also we do some consultancy. I'm also a trainer now for 4 years. And as an IT guy, and I'm quite sure that you will all know this, if you know something of IT, you are the IT guy. And everyone can come to your office, you can help everyone. So that's what happened on Monday as well. So on Monday, a colleague of mine entered our desk. We are in the corner of our building. And so she asked, I need to prepare this audit. I have some reports created for the auditor. How should I share it? And she immediately started answering our own questions. So she said, well, maybe I could use the USB stick. And then she kept silent. And she repeated it, and then she corrected herself because she said, well, maybe that's not of today anymore. Maybe we shouldn't use that anymore. But it made me think, and it was kind of funny, it made me think of this report from Honeywell, where we see that last year, 50% of all the attacks that we see in OT environments were designed to be run from USB devices. Because in USB or in OT environments, we still use USB devices. Does anyone know why we still use USB devices in OT environments? Yeah, indeed. Yeah, so you can connect physically to it, and that's because often those OT environments are air-gapped. And USB sticks have the magic to be able to cross that bridge, to be able to cross the air gap. And that's also what attackers are focusing on. So they see this and they develop malware especially for being run from USB devices. And also from the report, we can see that a lot of people are still in denial. And that's also what we get as a feedback when we enter conversations with our customers, when we're doing pre-sales. Some people are saying, well, my OT network is protected because it is isolated and air-gapped. But yeah, apparently that's not true. So I hope that we're all on the same line. Even though your network is air-gapped, you still need to keep cybersecurity in mind. Now, from the same report, we could also see that there is more and more malware being developed for those OT environments. So these are some of them, the most used. So last year, it was Indestroyer and Black Energy, which were used the most. From the report, we could see that they are using old vulnerabilities in our systems from 2010, 2016. Nothing new, of course, because OT environments often have legacy systems. And then when they get into the network and they have installed like a backdoor, for example, we see that often they use living off the land techniques to do so. So these are techniques, protocols which you use already in your network, so which are harder to detect. So the big elephant in the room now, we're all convinced that we need cybersecurity in OT environments, but the question is, how are we going to do that? And before we tackle that question, I want to point out a few differences between IT and OT, because that's very important. We cannot just implement IT security solutions in an OT environment. So the first one, for example, is based on the system design and integration. So OT environments, they last long. 10 years, 20 years, it's not an exception. So these systems are built for that. With IT, it's very short. 3 years and I have a new laptop. Nothing new. So that means OT environments are built to last. They are reliable. With IT, yeah, it's easy to replace them. Another thing, security concerns. With OT, physical security is important. Safety is key. Why? Because OT is focused on the outside world. It does things in our world. We can feel it, we can see it, we can smell it. So it could be dangerous if something happens to those devices. With IT, yeah, well, they are created with cybersecurity. Like, you have software, and we expect that this software has built-in security. With OT, that's not the case, because they are specifically built for their sole purpose, and often they just don't have the space anymore to include cybersecurity. So we have different targets for OT and IT. The risks. So for operational technology, downtime should be avoided at all costs, because it will have a safety and financial impact. It can cost lives. That's also what they say about OT. A breach in IT costs money, a breach in OT costs lives. And it could also be true. For example, we have a water facility where they're cleaning drinking water. If we could poison the water, yeah, then we could all die from it. So it's very important. So the level of security which we require from our organization is different. With IT, yeah, it's focused more on flexibility. We can just replace laptops, that's all fine. And that brings us to the performance. So with OT, availability is key. We want reliable systems. With IT, that's not the case. With IT, if my laptop is rebooting, okay, that's pretty dumb, that's shitty, I should wait for 5 to 10 minutes, but in the end I can still continue, and the company won't have any damage. With OT, that's not the case. Every time that some of your devices go down, you are losing money. So that's very important. And it's also important to have a look at connectivity, because with OT we have traditionally isolated environments. With IT, that's not the case. With IT, everything is connected. And why am I focusing on this especially? Because if we have a look at the differences between IT and OT, we will also need to implement different solutions in our cybersecurity stack, because we need to make sure that our OT cybersecurity solutions can handle isolated environments, that they don't need internet connectivity to get their databases and stuff. We need to make sure that OT environments or OT cybersecurity solutions are non-intrusive, because you cannot just stop something. With a laptop, it's easy. I block the program, user complains, and we can solve it. With OT, if we stop it, the process is stopped, and we are losing money. We need to shut down the production facility, for example. And that's also with change management. So with OT, it's rigorously tested. With IT, it's very dynamic. So we can often just change. With OT, you see it, it's pointed on the slide, fear of impacting physical operations. If it works, it works. Let it rest, don't touch it. With IT, yeah, it's easier to play with it and to try something out. So yeah, you need to have cybersecurity solutions which are fitted for an OT environment. But you could say, well, then as we have OT environments now, my biggest thing is now to have cybersecurity solutions. Well, I don't believe that. So I would say the biggest risk to an OT environment is not a cyber attack, but it's the lack of visibility. And why is this? Very important, and it's also applicable to IT, right? If you don't know what you have, well then, can you secure it? I don't believe it is. And it's also indicated in a lot of models, in a lot of legislations and stuff. It always starts by the identify step. So that's always the first step. And that's the reason for it, because you need to know what you want to secure. And the reason why I take the model of ARC is a research organization in the US, is because they are also pointing out the level of OT and IT in their diagram. So it's based on NIST, the NIST framework. And you see that with IT, we are in the respond and recover phase. So we can already take automated actions, we are confident of it. With OT, we are still in the secure connectivity phase, and it seems that we cannot can over the next step. It seems that it is difficult. The reason for this is because we didn't do our identify step properly. Because with identify, you could say, well, I know what systems I am running, so I can just implement protection on the devices that support it, like install an AV solution. But then you come to the defense step where you're going to secure connectivity. And that's like creating firewall policies, like limit the access. And that's often what is happening with those trajectories that they are using. They didn't do their identify step properly, so they know what they have, but they don't know how they work. So creating visibility and doing this identification is key. And so therefore, if you want to create a roadmap to cybersecurity in an OT environment, that's the first step that you should take. Have a look at all those things which you should gather around your solutions. Like, for example, I want to know what type they are. I want to know connection details, like MAC address, IP address, if they are connected to the network, but also the segments. Segmentation will be important in one of the next phases. If you don't define the segments right now in your identify step, you will need to do it later and it will slow down the process. So also include the segments, like for example, let's take the water facility again. We have one segment responsible for pumping up the water, one segment for treating the water. Already divide them. Also have the physical location, that's just easy for you to know where it is located in the factory, but also the operating system and the software you are running. Because based on that, one of the next steps, you can see whether you should patch them, for example, for vulnerabilities. And also the Purdue model. I guess you all know the Purdue model. So 0 is like the physical things, the sensors, and then we have level 0 to 3, which is basically stitching it all together. The thing about the Purdue model is that one layer cannot talk or can only talk to the layer above or below it. So it is best practice to adhere to this network design. So that's also why you should include the Purdue model of every component in your factory as well, in order to be able to better provide this segregation in communication between different layers. And that goes hand in hand with the connectivity requirements, right? And connectivity requirements can also go a bit further. Like, for example, do you need internet access for this sensor to work? Does it send data to the cloud, for example? Or does it need inbound access, for example, to do maintenance? These are things which you should be aware of. And this also includes the risk factors. Like, for example, if we have defined that we are using an operating system which might be vulnerable, we can tag it. We can say, well, we acknowledge that there are some vulnerabilities, but for example, we cannot patch it because it's too old, for example, or maybe the system has physical access. Remember the USB stick? I could plug in my USB stick into the device. Well, then I should maybe secure my physical access more. All those things, they should drill down to a score, and this score is heavily based on the criticality for operations. So basically, you should define for every component how critical they are for the operation of your factory. If I can shut down the plant, for example, by dismissing one component, that's really critical. If it is, I don't know, just a camera in the office, yeah, it might not be that critical. Now, how can we define these levels? Well, therefore, we can have a look at, for example, the IEC 62443 legislation. So it's basically a framework which works on those levels. It works on security levels. So on the left-hand side, you can see all the, let's say, requirements of everyone in the process. So you see, for example, we have the manufacturers. They are responsible for building the components. We have the system integrators. They are responsible for stitching it together, bringing the components together, building the system. And we have the asset owner, that's the end customer, who is then responsible for defining policies and procedures in how to use and preferably also how not to use the systems. And dependent on who you are, you can create targets for it. So we have the security level target and the security level achieved. You see the red arrow is going down. So it is initiated by the asset owner. So you could basically say, well, I want to reach this security level. It's then up to the manufacturer and also a bit to the system integrator to reach that level, to achieve the level. So that's what the A stands for. Security level achieved instead of security level target. And the security level can be defined based on 5, let's say, values, 0 to 4. And it's based on the risk that it is as a cybersecurity risk, but also the impact of your organization, which is also very important. So if we have a look at the different scores that we can give our components, then you could see that, for example, level 0, we don't really care. It could be a vending machine with a 4G module, so that the vendor knows how many waffles you sold. I don't care. It's not connected to my environment. My employees will get angry because they cannot get their waffle out of it. But if it is just shut down, fine, let it be. Level 1, 2, 3, and 4 introduce some impact. So that's important to focus on. So level 1 is like, it could be coincidental. For example, you misconfigured something and this creates a minor impact in your environment. Level 2 is actually with intention. So if something is breachable or is interesting to get breached with intention, it should at least have level 2. It's also, as we have seen, in terms of how important it is for the factory, the higher the score, the more important. So if you reach level 4, for example, this could mean that your complete factory is down. You need to stop the operations, and it can cost lives or money or both. So it's really important. And once you have those levels, you can start creating segments where you can say, well, all those level 4 assets will get the same type of security. All those level 3 will get the same type of security. It makes it just easier for you, and that's again the visibility we want to create by using these models in order to know what to secure and how to secure it. That's the goal. The reason, or the question now is, how should we do it? And therefore you can use the Westlands Advisory Report. So it's basically a report which evaluates all vendors based on their OT capabilities. So for example, the darker the color, the better they are in a specific segment that we have discussed. So for example, here the dark blue colors are very good at creating asset visibility. That is what we are focusing on. But you could, for example, also use it to build your own security stack in OT security, because I can imagine that you don't want to have 20 vendors all at the same time. You need to manage them all together. So then, for example, you could have a look overall at this report and see which is scoring decently enough to reach your target level, your security level, so that the security level target and the security level achieved reach at the same level with the vendor you have chosen. Now, that's the visibility step. So we have created visibility, we have identified our assets, then now control. How are we going to control our environment? How can we implement cybersecurity without disrupting the operations? And you could use, for example, legislations for this. This is the most easy one. We have some like ISO 27001, we have NIS2 now, we have the NIST framework, some other frameworks as well. Well, here, especially in Belgium, we all need to comply to NIS2, especially in OT environments. We're often targeted and we will often get audited on our compliance to NIS2. So why not use that as a starting point? Because these legislations have not been created to post penalties on a factory. No, they have been created to help you because CCB is doing a really good job. They are really good at their work. And so you can use it as a starting point to build your story. So that's also my advice. If you have compliance reasons, for example, this is now NIS2, well, go for it. have a look at what you should adhere to, and use those targets as a starting point to build your story. Now, I am more fan of the NIST framework. That's this one. It's designed by the US. Should I go back? Okay, so the NIST framework, developed by the US, just because it is more implemented, more widely implemented, it has more data, it's also applicable to OT environments, and there they have defined the steps into different phases. We have identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So you could also use these steps, but yeah, how could you imagine then what we should focus on? For example, we see asset management on identify. Yeah, should that be a big priority or not so big priority? Well, therefore, and I really like this diagram, it's one from Verve, which is a research center. Verve has mapped all the requirements of the NIST framework in terms of, one, their level, like they are in the NIST framework, but also in terms of the time they require to get implemented. And this shows you actually what to focus on. So the more we go to the left, the more we have quick wins, the more or the easier they are to get implemented. And what do we see at the bottom? And what were we talking about? Inventory, creating visibility. That's the starting point. You cannot start without it. So that's also why it is located in the furthest corner. So how can you do this? I'm pretty convinced that if you want to create visibility in your environment, yeah, you can walk through the factory, reach your 20,000 steps, have your notebook, but I think an asset inventory tool will be easier to implement, will be easier to use. It will save you time and money. So that's what you can use for this step. Some other things, like for example, we have the patching. If we know what we have, we know what is patchable. So for patching, yeah, we often look, and now we're specifically looking at solutions, patch management solutions, or if you do have specific things which you cannot patch, because they're old, because they're not supported anymore, then you can have a look at, for example, virtual patching on your firewall level. So we can apply the patch on a network level to stop attacks, for example. The next step that we can focus on is network mapping and connections. That was a step where it went wrong in the previous graph. We didn't know how the connections were flowing in our network. So also here, have a look at tools like asset discovery tooling, but also firewalling, because they can help you visualize how these tools are interconnecting with each other. And these can give you a good view on what later security policies you can implement in your environment. Then we have endpoint protection. That's an easy one. If the system supports it, I would always install an AV solution on it, whether it be next generation antivirus or EDR. Often these systems have a non-intrusive mode, like detect only, do not block. And that's ideal for OT systems because then you at least know that something is wrong. If you don't have a tool on it, you won't know it, it won't get stopped, or you won't get alerted. So very important. But also sandboxing could be part of this. We have network segmentation, and I've included this as a quick win, although it's in the middle of the diagram. And that's because I believe that with segmentation, you can already overcome a lot of the issues that we face today in our environments. And we do consultancy as well as exclusive networks. I know customers who still have a flat network in their factory. All is in the same broadcast domain. They have no visibility because all is flowing to each other. They do not need to cross a gateway, so that's an issue. We do not want this. Also, identity and access management, very popular during the recent years. Why? Because, if you can secure who can access the devices, you have control over it. A very easy one, create a separate Active Directory environment for your OT environments, because then all the accounts are already segregated. But you can also implement things like, for example, an identity detection and response solution, so IDR, multi-factor authentication, a PAM solution, or you can implement ZTNA or SASE, or use NAC device to also implement physical security. So there are different solutions that can implement your identity and access management. We also have the intrusion detection systems. That's easy, that's firewall. Or we can also look at specialized OT security solutions. These OT security solutions can also help you with creating visibility. A vendor of our portfolio so is Nozomi. So they are really targeted at analyzing OT protocols, creating visibility, knowing what is good and what is wrong in the boundaries of those protocols, and they often use machine learning for it. Next, we have the anomaly detection, and there again, we have our OT security solutions because they know the protocols, but also NDR, network detection and response. It's basically EDR, just focused on behavior, detection with machine learning, but on the network level. And one which is often forgotten and really easy to install in an OT network because it's non-intrusive, deception technology. Because it has the capability to alert you, but you don't need to change your environment for it. You can just implement, for example, an OT system, an ICS system. If it is targeted for some reason, you know that's not normal because that system is not in use. It's a honeypot. So at least then you are aware that something is wrong. And that's key, because then you can win time. And then on the last part, we have behavioral anomaly. So that's everything, all the acronyms with an R in the back. So EDR, NDR, IDR, XDR. They all focus on machine learning and bring together all the data in a data lake. And that's power because then with machine learning, they can do baselining. Know what is good, know what is wrong, know what is normal. And last but not least, we also need people managing our solutions. So that's the SOC team. So if you want to do security analytics, you need to have people for it. Or you can outsource it, of course. But at least you need to have something, and it's also often included in the regulations, that you can do threat hunting. You have an incident response plan, an incident response team. So also that, don't forget those people. Now, I hope you realize that in order to do all these steps, visibility is key. So therefore, focus on this visibility tab. Invest a lot of time in it. Better do it good, because otherwise you need to revert to another step again. So you do not want this. If you have this visibility, keep it up to date, and then you are confident that you can create a story to move forward. So that's really important. And I hope that's also what you learned from this presentation, and you got some insights in how you can, from the visibility, start on and get some better awareness in how you can create your cybersecurity story for OT. So with that, I'm going to end my presentation. Do not hesitate to scan the QR code. So we do some events. I think in 2 or 3 weeks, we have a webinar around OT with Fortinet and Nozomi in it. So if you are interested, you should definitely subscribe. If you have questions, you can send an email to tag@exclusivenetworks.be, or you can come to our booth, which is just in front of this theater. And then I want to thank you all for your attention and for being here, and hope to see you again at our booth here in a few minutes. Thank you.